On July 24, 1987, the strongest navy on Earth sheltered behind the tanker it came to protect, because the water ahead was full of mines. It is happening again now. This is why it keeps happening. To see the pattern, you have to go all the way back. About a fifth of the world's oil moves through a strait just 21 miles wide. The Strait of Hormuz is the only sea exit from the Persian Gulf. Iran holds the entire north shore. Oman's Musandam Peninsula holds the south. And inside those 21 nautical miles, the actual shipping lane in each direction is about 2 miles wide. Normally, some 20 million barrels of oil pass through every single day. Close it, and the bypass pipelines around it can carry only about 2.6 million barrels. There is no real substitute. Most of that oil goes to one place, Asia. So when this strait chokes, the whole world coughs. So how did the world end up hostage to this water? It starts with a gusher. On May 26, 1908, at Masjid Soliman in Persia, drillers strike oil. It is the first major commercial oil find in the entire Middle East, and it opens the Gulf's century as the petroleum heartland of the world. 6 years later, that oil becomes a matter of national survival. In 1914, Winston Churchill, running the Royal Navy, converts the world's most powerful fleet from coal to oil, and he pushes Britain to buy a controlling stake in the Anglo-Persian Oil Company. Parliament approves it, 228 votes to 48. The mightiest navy of its day is now hostage to Gulf oil, and every great power takes note. For decades, the oil simply flows. Then, in 1973, the Arab oil embargo proves it can be shut off on purpose. In the U.S. State Department's own words, the price of crude first doubled, then quadrupled, from about $3 a barrel to about $12. Oil is now openly a weapon. And when the Soviet Union invades Afghanistan, Washington decides the Gulf is worth fighting for. In 1980, President Carter declares that any outside attempt to control the Persian Gulf will be repelled by any means necessary, including military force. The Carter Doctrine is aimed at Moscow, not Iran, but it commits the American military to this water, and it creates the force that becomes U.S. Central Command. Washington has set a tripwire across the Gulf, and it will not have to wait long. Because next door, Iran and Iraq have been slaughtering each other for 4 years, and the war is about to spill into the sea lanes. In 1984, Iraq widens its air war to the tankers loading at Iran's Karg Island oil terminal, trying to strangle Iranian oil exports. Iran retaliates against the Kuwaiti and Saudi tankers serving Iraq's Arab backers, and the tanker war is on. Iraqi jets fire Exocet missiles. Iran answers with Chinese-made silkworm missiles on the shore, sea mines laid in secret, and swarms of Revolutionary Guard speedboats. Before it is over, Lloyd's of London will count 546 ships damaged, and roughly 430 civilian seafarers killed, hundreds of merchant ships attacked in the busiest oil lane on Earth. And so far, America is only watching. That lasts 3 more years. On May 17, 1987, the war finds the U.S. Navy. An Iraqi warplane puts 2 Exocet missiles into the frigate USS Stark, and 37 American sailors are killed. The attacker was Iraq, the side Washington was tacitly backing. Saddam Hussein calls it a mistake and apologizes. So the first American blood in these waters is drawn not by the enemy, but by the partner, and it changes nothing. Within 2 months, the Navy is sailing deeper into water nobody has swept. So back to that convoy, and how the strongest navy on Earth ended up in line behind the ship it came to save. Kuwait, its tankers under Iranian fire, had asked both superpowers for protection, Washington and Moscow alike, and that Cold War bidding war is what pulled the U.S. Navy in. In July, Operation Earnest begins. 11 Kuwaiti tankers are reflagged as American ships and convoyed through the Strait of Hormuz, the largest U.S. naval convoy operation since World War II. It is humbled inside 3 days. On July 24th, the very first reflagged tanker, the Bridgeton, hits an Iranian mine. No one is hurt, but the warships have to fall in behind the wounded tanker, single file, to avoid the mines. The protectors end up sheltering behind the protected. The Gulf has a way of doing that to superpowers, and the mines under that convoy did not lay themselves. 2 months later, American helicopters catch an Iranian ship in the act of dropping them into the water. The mines keep coming anyway. For months, the convoys grind through. Then, on April 14, 1988, the frigate USS Samuel B strikes an Iranian mine. The blast tears a 21-foot hole in the hull and breaks the ship's keel. Nobody dies, though 10 sailors are badly hurt, 4 of them seriously burned. The crew fights fire and flooding for hours and saves her. Navy divers then recover mines from the same waters and match the serial numbers to Iran. Washington has answered before, twice, but never like this. This answer takes a single day. The only time the United States Navy has ever traded surface-to-surface missile fire with an enemy, the whole thing was over in 1 day. On April 18, 1988, 4 days after the mine, American forces launch Operation Praying Mantis. They destroy 2 Iranian oil platforms, sink the frigate Sahand, cripple her sister ship Sabalon, and sink the missile boat Joshan, and by nightfall, much of Iran's operational navy is gone. It is not costless. 2 U.S. Marine aviators, Captain Kenneth Hill and Captain Stephen Leslie, die when their Sea Cobra helicopter crashes into the Gulf that same day. What happens 11 weeks later is the part of this story that never healed. It is July 3, 1988, and the cruiser USS Vincennes is in a running gun battle with Iranian speedboats when its radar picks up an aircraft climbing out of Bandar Abbas. The crew, braced for an attack, reads the track as a fighter jet diving toward the ship. It is not. It is Iran Air Flight 655, a scheduled passenger flight to Dubai, climbing inside its assigned commercial corridor. The Vincennes fires, and all 290 people aboard are killed, 274 passengers and 16 crew, dozens of them children. The Navy's own investigation blames what it calls scenario fulfillment, a stressed crew making the data fit the disaster it feared. Years later, the United States will pay $61.8 million to the families, part of a $131.8 million settlement, but ex gratia, explicitly without admitting liability. It will never formally apologize. In Iran, that wound has never closed, and everything that has happened in this strait since carries its shadow. Remember that, because it explains what Iran does 38 years later. 7 weeks later, on August 20th, 1988, an exhausted Iran accepts UN Ceasefire Resolution 598. The 8-year Iran-Iraq war ends, and the tanker war ends with it. The navies go home. The strait stays exactly where it is. For about 2 decades, the strait stays mostly quiet. Then the sequel starts getting remade. In 2011, Iran threatens to close the strait over nuclear sanctions. The United States warns it will not tolerate a closure, and within weeks sails an aircraft carrier group straight through. The threat fades, but the pattern does not. In 2019, ships are hit again. 2 tankers, the Front Altair and the Kukuka Courageous, are attacked in the Gulf of Oman. Washington blames Iran, and Iran denies it. Then comes the tit for tat. Britain seizes the Iranian tanker Grace 1 and Iran seizes the British-flagged Stena Impero. A U.S.-led coalition forms to escort shipping through the strait, a direct echo of Earnest will 3 decades on. Every decade, the Gulf runs the same movie again. All of it leads to now. On February 28, 2026, a U.S.-Israeli air campaign opens a war with Iran, and Iran does what it has long threatened and what 1988 left it no other way to do. It blockades the Strait of Hormuz. The International Energy Agency calls it the largest supply disruption in the history of the global oil market. Flow through the strait collapses from about 20 million barrels a day to about 2.7 million, and Brent crude spikes to a peak of about $126 a barrel on April 30th, its highest in years. On June 17th, Washington and Tehran sign a 14-point memorandum reopening the strait on a 60-day clock, and oil pulls back. Then, in early July, the deal collapses. Iran strikes 3 tankers. The United States hits more than 80 targets. Oil spikes again, and by mid-July, the strait is effectively closed again. Where nearly 90 ships a day used to pass, only a trickle gets through. Step back, and the pattern is almost embarrassing. It is the same water, the same choke point, and the same escort logic, run by the same country's navy, fighting the same fights, 40 years apart. The ships change names, from Bridgeton to Stena Impero, and the missiles get smarter, but the geography never moves. About 1/5 of the world's oil still has to pass through a channel 21 miles wide, and there is still no real substitute for it. More than a century after that first Persian gusher, every generation rediscovers that the world economy runs through this one strip of water, and every generation is surprised. From a gusher in 1908 to a blockade in 2026, this has been one continuous story. A navy converts to oil, an embargo turns that oil into a weapon, and a doctrine commits America to the Gulf. A tanker war breaks out, convoys sail into it, and a battle comes and goes in a single day. A flight never lands, and that wound stays open. A ceasefire quiets the water for a while, but then a threat, a seizure, and finally a blockade bring it all the way to the present. And all of it happens in one strait, the entire time. The strait is still there, the oil still moves, or it doesn't. And the next chapter is being written right now. If you want the history behind the next headline, subscribe, and we'll trace what led here next.